Richard McPherson, you seem patriotic today, my guy.
I feel patriotic today.
Yeah, you look it.
I must have missed the day yesterday. Some sort of day was yesterday.
National Sugar Beet Day.
Oh, National
Sugar Day. There it is.
National Sugar Day. Well, I should have had more ice cream yesterday.
Should have had more ice cream. I wore this sugar beet real sugar sweater around. It was pretty fantastic. Went to a sugar beet farm, which was equally fantastic. And yeah, man, God bless it. It was the best.
Well, growing up in Hawaii, we had cane fields. And so you go over there and bust off a piece of cane or cut off a piece of cane. And you'd chew on a piece of cane about that long pretty much all day.
Yeah, this is the thing I was thinking about. Somebody was like, oh, sugar. I've kind of come around on sugar, to be honest. And, growing up, I had that pouring thing on the table where I'd like make grape nuts or something and then just pour half a cup of sugar on. That's not good, right? Like it didn't make me healthy.
A little too much.
A little too much. But here's the thing. You can take sugar out of your diet. Totally fine. But you still eat sweet things because you've not eliminated your sweet tooth, right? So then it's like, are we using petroleum byproducts to scratch that itch? Like, what do we do? Everything in moderation, it's like, okay, great. So it's okay that sugar exists. It's just not okay to eat a dump truck of it at every single meal. Like exercise a little self-constraint, man.
Well, I didn't do that for a long time. That was about 30 years before I decided I better start watching what I'm eating. I've already lost 30 pounds.
No kidding. Good for you.
It's there's all these fad diets, all these pills, all these everything. But I just kept eating after I stopped exercising, and calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, look, last week we covered the 3 Mile Island. I got a lot of feedback from that because, again, it is one of those events that lives in infamy that the U.S. will likely never shed. But I brought up a point today with somebody else on energy that more people have gotten sick and died from E. coli poisoning from Chipotle when they didn't properly blanch the onions than got sick and died from 3 Mile Island because nobody got injured, right?
Yeah.
That's something that most people, myself included until I met you, just did not, at least people responding to me are like, I had no idea. I was like, I know. I asked you if we could keep going because the 3 notable examples, the 2 remaining are Fukushima and Chernobyl. And
we'll get through them because I have a far closer relationship with the 2 of them than I did with TMI. Far closer. Even though I know people that were there and in the control room and on site the day that it happened and, of course, days afterwards. But I have a very close relationship with Chernobyl because that's why I was asked to go represent the U.S. at the International Atomic Energy Agency, was the fallout from that, and then in the case of Fukushima Daiichi, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning when I got a call from the senior safety guy in the Prime Minister's office. And he had remembered me from when I was at the International Atomic Energy Agency. I didn't remember him, but he remembered me.
No.
And I think it was because the work that we were doing there for 4 years, studying nuclear fuel cycle facilities, the environment and public opinion, we put a lot of work in. And I thought we should be sharing this with people that are here now that actually have something to do with nuclear power, which out of the 105 member nations was only about 32 or 33. All the rest of them were there just because they have a spot there and their families who rule the country, control the country, sent them there as a perk or they sent them there as spies or whatever.
Sure.
So the Japan office was one of the offices that I said, hey, would you like a briefing sometime on some of the things we're finding and doing to help people with nuclear power? And they said yes. So he remembered that. So, and I've had the same phone number since I was at the International Atomic Energy Agency. So he calls me up. And of course, I didn't know anything about it. Hadn't been on the news yet. When I turned on TV, it was all over the news. But he called and he said, we've had an earthquake. We've had a big tidal wave. It's hit a couple of our power plants, one of them really badly. And I said, well, tell me, what do you know right now? So he told me. So I'm listening to him talk, and here's what I said. I said, water, water, water. He said, water. He said, we're worried about the cores. I said, if what you've told me is true, the cores are gone. So he took it aboard. He took a lot of things aboard. As a matter of fact, over the next, 48 hours, he and I were on the phone all the time.
And may I ask a question? When you say the cores are gone, first off, how many cores were in operation at that plant?
Well, there were, let's see, how many? Of the 4 on the lower level, 3 of the 4 were in operation. Unit number 4 was defueled, and it was undergoing refueling.
Gotcha.
But on the lower level, which got hit the worst, 3 of the 4 were operating at the time.
The thing that I'm starting to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, about the plants, right? Like the concept of a nuclear power plant. You have all of this stuff, right? And all of it, like I could look at one and be like, okay, this is all
stuff.
It's all related. It's just a bunch of stuff. But in reality, what you have is one central piece of incredibly condensed energy that you are slowly allowing to release the energy slowly, and everything else around it is related to capturing and containing that energy ball. And that's it.
And using it.
So converting it into some kind of useful something. So when this guy's talking and he's worried about the core, he's saying, look, this entire thing with all of this stuff that Matt just sees, like, that's a lot of stuff. It's all wrapped around just this little core of energy. And if that's gone, that's the primary concern. It's like, oh no, that's the only reason we're all here.
That's right. The reason that everything we see exists is for something like your coffee cup. And when you look at the amount of really uranium that's in there, it's really not that much. But it's dispersed in the core so that it can be evenly fission, and we can take the power off more easily by circulating water through it, whether it's a pressurized water reactor or a boiling water reactor, which is the type that they had at Fukushima. And as I recall, there were 3. They were all from General Electric. I think there were 3 types, but I sort of knew them.
Sure.
I actually knew them pretty well by the time 2011 rolled around, because I spent a lot of time at not just at the International Atomic Energy Agency, but before studying the differences between pressurized water reactors and boiling water reactors. But
so you tell him, you're like, look, man, the cores are gone.
That was with what he told me.
Yeah.
Because what he told me was the wave came up and went into. So here's what I didn't know. When they were built, whoever built it and worked with General Electric and the Japanese designed everything to be up at a fairly high level, more than 50 feet above the surface of the ocean, about 50 feet above the surface of the ocean. Japanese are into efficiency. So they go off and they do their own calculations, and they say, okay, for this part of the nuclear power plant, the large pumps that bring in seawater and circulate it through cooling so that you can cool the steam off the steam turbines, we're gonna take this area and we're gonna take the land down, and we're gonna take it down to about 10 feet off the water. And that way we use less electricity to pump the water to provide the cooling.
Right.
So they had all these calculations. I believe, no, I'm not going to speculate. So anyway, they got their way. It's their plant. They're paying the bills. So these large pumps that move seawater and everything associated with them, which means the motors, the motor controllers, the wiring, the instrumentation, the controls, everything, that's down that lower level. So it's closer to the ocean. So when the tsunami was created from a 9.0 Richter scale event underneath the ocean, it was estimated by a number of people of various sizes when it hit Fukushima Daiichi. It wasn't the highest place. That tsunami was not the highest there. The highest was somewhere else. But it hit after they did all the analysis and stuff and where the water was, it came up about 50 feet. So it completely engulfed the pumps were down at around 10 feet. The top of the pump was probably, 16, 17 feet. And all their motor controllers and all the instrumentation and power that goes with them. So that was all wiped out. But it also hit the buildings themselves where the reactors were in. For reasons nobody's ever been able to tell me, the emergency diesel generators were on the sea side of the building. And the tsunami broke in the doors of the diesel generator sets. Diesel generator sets wouldn't run. So you had no power.
So you had the plants that were at 10 feet above sea level instead of 50.
The pumps.
And I thought the reactors and the buildings were actually down there as well.
No. Oh. They were at about 50 feet off the
excuse me. Okay,
mean sea level, as I recall.
Okay, great. So you have the plants up there, but the pumps to save energy were down near the sea level.
Yes.
And then the emergency diesel generators were also in the front.
But of the plants, but up to 50-foot level.
Okay. And the wave went high enough to hit those.
And break open the doors. Okay. So the doors, the buildings themselves for the emergency diesel generators, the building that housed them and the doors that they had on the buildings, they should have been hardened when they built them.
And maybe not right
this is not, this is not Monday morning quarterbacking.
Right.
But had I been there in 1970 when we were responsible for building them, I would say, since you've chosen to have the emergency diesel generators here and the tanks, the fuel tanks for them, I suggest that they harden the building and it can withstand a wave or it can withstand something. I don't know. I don't know what would have gone through my mind in those days.
But it needs to withstand whatever has already come up this high and knocked this stuff out. Like, this is your last stand, right? That's why it's the emergency diesel. Like, that's it. And if this goes, you have nothing to back up and protect the cores.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Because they have the pumps. They either have the main coolant pumps or they've got some other pumps that will circulate water through the cores to keep them cool. Those were all gone. They had no electricity. And what he described to me, of course, was I'm trying to think through what he's telling me. And what he's telling me is the cores are damaged anyway. They're gone. 3 out of the 4. He told me that the one unit was shut down for refueling. In a boiling water reactor, there is no fuel pool at the same level as a reactor. The fuel pool is located up above the reactor. So the fuel pool is higher than the reactor, and probably what's going through my mind, the tsunami did not hit where the fuel pools were. They didn't go that high.
And the fuel pools where you take the core and switch out more uranium.
That's correct. Where you take them out of the core, they need to cool down radioactively. So you stick them in a fuel pool for a couple 3 years. Or you put the new fuel in there and you bring the new fuel out of there and put it in when you're doing the refueling
But there's
cycle.
a big pool where something's cooling down.
That's right. Big pool up on top and slightly off center from the reactor.
Got it.
So as I'm listening to him, I'm actually making a drawing for myself. So I'm making a drawing for myself, and I got sea level, and I got this first step up here where the circulating pumps are for seawater, and then I got the other one up here where the reactor starts, and then I drew a boiling water reactor, and here's the core, and here's this big area where steam and water circulates, and you drive a turbine stuff, and then up here where you've got the fuel pool. So I said to myself, okay, the fuel pools are probably okay, but the reactors are gone because you got no cooling water. And I don't remember how long you can go without cooling in a boiling water reactor, but it's not that long. It's not that many hours. And where you have additional damage, where instead of only water being there, it's got breaks and it's got steaming off, it's less time. So in my opinion, right then and there, was because they didn't have good communications at all, so they didn't know everything about this. Is this is in the afternoon. About by the time he called me, it was about 5:00 in the evening, their time, I think. So they did have a camera located on the south side of the plants, up a little higher and a little bit seaward. That was on a big tower there. So he gave me the URL so I could log into it, which I did. And I started watching it. And so, but anyway, the first thing I told him was water, water, water. Then he talked to me about the cores. I said, if what you told me is true, the cores are gone. You have to get water in there. If you don't get water in there, the damage is only going to become a lot worse. And if you don't have a radiation event now that's going to the atmosphere and to the surrounding countryside, if you do not cool those cores, that will happen. Well, they didn't get them cooled in time, and they had major core damage with all three, I think.
And when you say major core damage, that's the coffee
melting.
cup and everything in here. It's like, dude, it's starting to break apart.
It started to melt, and they had some damage to the containment inside and outside, and they had some radionuclides that were already starting to leak. But that's not what caused the massive release of radionuclides that went around the area in the country. Those were the explosions that took place over the next couple of days. So I'm watching on, I think it's Saturday morning their time. I had my screen over here, and I'm writing stuff down because I've asked people a bunch of questions. They're coming back to me with answers. And all of a sudden, there's this explosion. It goes straight up. But it wasn't that bad of an explosion. Of course, if you're there, it's really bad. But to me, it wasn't that bad. Because what I was thinking of is what we call a zirconium water reaction. And that can be if you have that in the core is exposed and you've got some air and you've got a little bit of water, and it can be a huge explosion. Mentally, I didn't believe that was a zirc water reaction. Later on, it turned out that these 3 or 4 explosions that they did have was hydrogen leaking in to the containment sphere. And in my mind, I was confused by that also, because I know that the GE turns out to be like about a year after the ones that were put in Fukushima Daiichi. And of course, somebody from GE will probably call into you or me and say, well, you're wrong. But sometime, sometime in the 70s, I remember GE came out with a modification to the top of these containments that was meant to vent hydrogen. But so that's what's in my mind. These containments have this vent system on top to vent hydrogen out to the atmosphere, out of the containment. So I didn't think about a hydrogen explosion, but that's what they were. And then I come to find out a few days later, the Japanese had received the notice and whatever they needed to do to make that modification in the 70s, but they'd never done it. So there's the second big problem.
So the cores go, they put the emergency generators. First off, they put the water pumps down 10 feet off sea level. Then they put the emergency generators facing the sea in front of the reactors.
Right.
Those doors blow open, they're not hardened. So now you don't have the normal pump circulating, you don't have the emergency backup diesel. Cores are gone, they can't cool them off, and eventually what happens is you have a buildup of hydrogen within the containment area, because in the 70s, they hadn't modified, per GE's instructions, they hadn't modified the emergency venting system to let said potential hydrogen, if it built up, get expressed out and, removed so it didn't have an explosion. Because all of those things happened, you started having explosions.
So you had 3 things against you just sitting there that nobody thought about. You had the circulating pumps that were down near where the sea level was. You had the weak diesel generator little buildings around them. And they had never installed those vents. So you had 3 things going against you right there that were built-in problems. just waiting for something like, most likely event would be a tsunami.
Right.
So then you've got this, I was in a tsunami in Hawaii when I grew up there. And so it's not like a big wave like you think of a big wave. It's just a big wall of water. So when you got a wall of water that comes in that's 49 feet above the mean surface of the ocean, that's a lot of force. And the damage it did was amazing. But on top of that, over the next few days, you had these 3 or 4, I think it was 4 hydrogen explosions that basically did a lot of other damage to everything else around the plant. So I won't go into all the details, but I called around to friends of mine that I knew that, like me, had thought through and been involved in large catastrophes before. And among the things I asked friends of mine for was, where are all the helicopters in Japan? Where are all the diesel generators in Japan? Where's portable telecommunications equipment in Japan? Where are portable diesel pumps that we can pump any kind of water with? Where is the closest reservoir? How do we get miles of piping from that reservoir and pump from that reservoir there? What kind of mountains? Do we have mountains in the Fukushima area? Yeah, there's a mountain range there, and one of them, Automati, not Automati, I don't remember the name of it anymore. It's over 6,000 feet. So what I was looking for there is, do we have streams that are going from the mountain system down to the ocean that we could use those streams to quickly dam up and put pumps in there and pump fresh water down to those plants? Or the other thing was, I wonder what they have in the way of water running underground that we don't know about, that's running through underneath the Fukushima Daiichi site, that we've got groundwater under there that's going to be contaminated. But it's not just going to be contaminated. It's going to be taking, all by itself, it's going to be taking contaminated radioactive water and putting that right out there in the Pacific Ocean. So these are the kinds of things that I went through for the first few hours. The next day I thought about all this water, and I was talking to this guy in the Prime Minister's office. I said, you guys need to go out and buy a VLCC, a very large crude carrier. And you need to, and they're cheap. They're around somewhere. As a matter of fact, while we're talking, I found him one that was $70 million. I said, you need to go buy this right now and bring it up and moor it right off of Fukushima Daiichi and start to use that to store the water that's coming out of those plants. Because you're going to have a radioactive water disposal problem. And first you're going to have to capture it, so you're going to have to store it. And I said, what you can do with that is you have enough room in there to store it, and then you get a smaller tanker, and you put a system in there to partially clean up the water. Then you put it in that next tanker you're going to buy, and then take it out in the ocean and meter it out. Fix a device that goes down about 600 feet and meter it out, and then it'll dissipate in the ocean, and it'll be within what we call dump specs.
So you can essentially, through that triple, capture and cleaning and then distribution mechanism, the 3 different boats, you can get it down to the point where you're expelling something about 600 feet under the surface of the ocean. And it's safe enough for, like, if it were normal operation, you could have done that.
It would, the amount of dilution is so great down there. And anything that's heavy is going to fall. So it's going to fall to the bottom of the ocean. So, of course, my mind is, these are all emergency procedures you should do right now. Well, they never bought the VLCC. They decided to start building tanks on the grounds of Fukushima Daiichi. When I got there, they had tanks everywhere. I think they've got like a couple of thousand. They got 1,000 and 2,000 tanks there right now. And they've been dumping some into the Pacific Ocean. But they could have not had those tanks and the problems that they've caused had they bought that very large crude carrier and just put it right offshore and use that to fill those tanks, and then have a smaller tanker to pick up those tanks one by one after they cleaned them up. But they never did that. So after a few days, they started getting water in there. They did start using seawater, I think within 48 hours. Whether it took my advice to do it or not, I don't know. I don't think they used it to the degree that I would have probably ordered had I been there, but I really don't know that. So then I get a call to come over to visit. So I said, I want to bring a couple of people with me. And they said, sure. So I called a woman who started a life at Rocky Mountain Flats over north of Denver, which had some radiation on the ground. And she started life, I think, as someone that goes out, a health physics person that takes a radiac and measures the amount of radioactivity on the ground and then reports it. She, by the time I called her, I'd gotten to know her. She's a PhD, worked in all kinds of areas of nuclear, and she's now head of the nuclear engineering program at a major U.S. university, had about 300 nuclear power students. What I liked about her was the fact that she's done everything in the way of health monitoring, radiation monitoring, and all that, all the way up. And now she's teaching nuclear engineering. So she has got the right kind of experience for everything we're going to encounter over there. The other one was a friend of mine from the Navy who'd gone with a major utility and had actually retired from them. And he's an interesting guy. He's one of these guys that just didn't stop. Once you learn enough to operate a reactor, you get hired to supervise the operation of a reactor, and you're home free. All you got to do is go in for 8 hours a day. They pay you a bunch of money. But Tom kept studying, and he also went back to school and became a computer scientist. So I called him and I said, listen, can you take a couple of weeks and go with me to Japan because of Fukushima? And he said yes. So I called Kathy and I said, can you take off for a couple of weeks and go with me to Fukushima? And she said, why do you want me? So I told her. She said, I never thought about that. But between the two of them, there's nothing in nuclear they didn't know. Then you add me in that has a little bit of knowledge. And so we could really help these people. So we flew to Japan. We spent 10 days there. Spent a lot of time at a lot of the sites of both of the Fukushima reactors. Went all around the countryside and looked at this 3 zones that they'd put out there to keep people out of. We looked at what they'd done to date, what they were planning on doing, and we left them with, we had a meeting downtown Tokyo with Tokyo Electric Power Company and MIDI, which comes in the Prime Minister, or whatever he is, Prime Minister, I guess. And so we gave them the 10 top things they needed to do. They hadn't listened to me about some of the other things, but we gave them 10 things they needed to do. And I think about number 3 was get rid of all the rabbits and rodents on site. And when I read that to the team of people that were in the room there was about 40 people, and I could tell that they all looked around like, get rid of the rabbits and rodents. So anyway, we come back home. We're back about, 10 days, a couple weeks. Sean, my wife, calls me, and she says, they didn't take your advice. I said, what advice? She said, it's just been on the news that one Fukushima plant has lost cooling water, and it's starting to heat back up again. She said, do you know what the cause is? I said, no. She said either mice or rats ate through the shielding on the cable, and it shorted out and shorted out the pump, so the pump doesn't work anymore. Now, I think that was number 3 of my top 10 that I left them with. So these are things that people like myself have experience with, a lot of experience. So we pass them on to some of these new people, and some of them are older than us, been around doing it longer than us. But we don't say these things just because we want to say them. We say them for a reason. I write them down on a piece of paper for a reason, and people don't listen. And then Sean thought it was so funny. I didn't think it was funny. I felt sorry for him. But again, it's a case where experienced people, real experienced people, not people that talk a lot about it, we know what you need to do. I left them with it as one of the top 10, and it didn't get done. Fukushima is an economic disaster for Japan. The Japan government. So in Japan, the culture is that if you're my boss, I can't make decisions almost without clearing with you first. I can't make decisions that are going to embarrass you. The prime minister has some nuclear experience. I never could find out what that was. So the prime minister was second guessing people that were trying to make decisions. And then things that would percolate up through a supposed chain of command would not get acted upon either in time or at all because somebody in a more senior position didn't think it was worthwhile. So their culture is against them in a case like this. The fact that in the design and in the actual construction of the plant, where you've got the circulating water pumps are close to the ocean, the plant itself is got a weakened structure around it that your diesel generators get wiped out. You have too much going against you. So, while it's called an accident, it was an incident. It was an incident because we got this tidal wave that showed up. Well, if you look back in the history of Japan, they've had tidal waves. As a matter of fact, in 1986, they had a tidal wave that killed more people than this one killed. So they've got a long history of tidal waves, but evidently that didn't translate to where we put our nuclear power plants and how high above the water we put them and how we shield them in case we have a tsunami. Now, the guy that asked me to come over there when he was at the International Atomic Energy Agency, one of the things that we were doing was we were putting together in our report about teaching people about what to do in the event of a nuclear event, nuclear accident, etc. And what we wrote was, I'm the one that actually wrote it, from the president, prime minister, queen, or king, or dictator, or whatever, from that person all the way down to the newest hire at a nuclear power plant, has to know immediate actions. In other words, when the tsunami hit, the prime minister should already have known and have a book with him somewhere that says, here are your immediate actions. You don't have to ask anybody. You order these immediate actions, or you take these immediate actions. And all the way down the line to corporate in downtown Tokyo, the chairman of the company has immediate actions. The president has immediate actions. The CEO has immediate actions. Chief financial officer, they all have immediate actions. The plant manager has immediate actions. Everybody has immediate actions, and these need to be memorized. And you don't talk to anybody. You just order them done. They didn't do that. That's okay. They haven't done it in the United States either.
Oh, my God. Well, we can't criticize them for being better. We don't have the moral high ground.
Yeah. I mean, it's all over the world. I mean,
yeah.
And I know that about 30 of the countries that were there, we taught them that. And I taught half of them. When you have a nuclear accident or incident, there are immediate actions that you take from every level all the way up to whoever's in charge of the country.
Man. So bottom line, you have these three big things going against them, and a command structure that doesn't lend itself to more informed yet junior administrators taking the appropriate action. You have to be deferential to somebody with less information, but is in, higher up the hierarchy.
Less information, less expertise, less experience, and less knowledge. And now at our own power plants, we have a really good structure at American power plants, at the power plants themselves. So we're in good shape in the United States. But I can tell you, if you were to go over to, since we don't have a nuclear, well, we do have radioactive stuff going on at the INL. I bet if you went in Brad Little's office, you would not find a little book that says, if there is a radioactive incident on the highway transporting something, or at the INL, you wouldn't find a book that says, me as the governor, here's my immediate actions. And if you go over to California, where Newsom is, he for sure doesn't have a book like that.
He's trying to get rid of all those plants.
Okay.
Trying to get rid of all those dirty plants.
So, and the same thing goes for, power plants and the cities around them. You've got a city, and you've got a county, and you've got a state. In the city and the county, you have first responders. You have police, you have fire, you have EMS people, you have other kinds of people. They all, let's just talk about Diablo Canyon for a moment in California. Every single one of those entities, government entities, should have a little book somewhere, and they should have it, whoever's the head of it, whoever's the chief of police, chief of fire department, whoever's the head doctor in the area, whoever is the mayor or the head of the board of supervisors, they should have immediate actions that they know to take. They don't need to call somebody and say, are you kidding? No, you just take those actions. They don't. The latest one that I've actually seen is a Navy doctor who retired and went to work for a major hospital in California. And after 9/11, there was all this stuff going on around hospitals. Nothing different than what should have already gone on around if we have a nuclear incident. So he called me, he says, sometime when you're by here, come up for a cup of coffee. So I did. So he takes me in this room, says library, and here's surgery centers. So he said, here's our book on what to do in the event of a major catastrophe. So I go through it. It's probably 12 pages, maybe. And so my assumption was that I was in the ready reference library just for the surgeons. No, this is for the whole hospital. So he happened to be really good friends with the administrator. So the administrator came down and we sat and talked about this and said, well, I've never gotten any guidance from anybody about preparing something like that. Now, I don't know about down at the hospital level, but I know after 9/11, every city or a bunch of cities in the United States were given money to prepare their own plans covering everything. The only one that I've seen is the one for New Orleans. And I saw it after Katrina. It was about 40 pages long, and it was useless. So somebody said, you think it's useless? Yes, I do. Well, I do too. Do you know how much that was spent on that? I said, no. Well, the federal government gave the city of New Orleans $40 million to develop it.
Why was there something that sticks out immediately to show its uselessness? Like, what was it that it was useless? Get hand pumps and pump the water out. Or like, why was it useless? Just
I'm thinking about, of course, my immediate thought was a hurricane like Katrina.
Sure.
So what you want to do is you want to save lives.
Sure.
Okay. So that's the number one thing you ought to do. Well, the number one thing in here wasn't to mobilize all the forces that you had left and figure out what you had so you could start saving lives.
What was the first step?
It was, I don't remember. I went through this thing.
It wasn't save lives.
I went through this thing, and it's got all kinds of stuff that it's not totally useless, but it almost has nothing for a major disaster that might befall the city of New Orleans. Gosh. I would have expected that I would have seen a book that's about 6 inches thick, and in there would be medical, and in there would be
transportation, food,
communications,
yeah,
on and on and on. None of that. I mean, there wasn't even a reference to the Coast Guard. Not even a reference to the Coast Guard in that whole book. Or the reserves, or the National Guard.
So the reason you're scaring me is that you want to articulate that, hey, one, the biggest problem that that really was responsible for the issue at Fukushima was not the tidal wave. It was the placement of the pumps, the placement and weakness of the water generators, and the
diesel
generators, and the
they didn't put the vent on top of the domes.
They didn't retrofit. Okay, so and then the secondary problem is you have the response to the problem that was created by these three mistakes in the first place wasn't something like, don't think, just do these things and do them quickly and do them perfectly, and you will save lives and property.
So let's talk about two things that are simple. To me, they're simple. To other people, they may not be simple. If I owned a nuclear power plant that was near the water, and most of them are, I would have a separate set of pipelines and pumps that were prepared to be activated and used in the event that I lost electricity. And they would have their own sources of electricity. And they would probably be directly diesel powered, or they would be have a diesel electric generator associated with them. And all of that would be hardened. I would keep it clean, I would keep it free of water, but I would just have it there. The other thing is I would have the ability to, like we do on ships, to reroute electricity around so that I could get electricity in places. On ships, especially Navy ships, we have these cables that are pre-hung in compartments on Navy ships. And they're power cables. They're three wires. And there are these plugs around on ships that go between on a bulkhead or a wall through the wall. And so I can, in this compartment, let's say I got this compartment here and this compartment here, and I need to get electricity over to this compartment because these two don't have any and this one doesn't have any. I can take power from this compartment, plug in these cables here, come to this wall or bulkhead here, plug them in there, plug them in there, plug them in there, and now I've got electricity. And I can do that in, 10 minutes. But I would have the same thing at our power plants. And we don't.
So bottom line is,
it doesn't matter whether it's a coal plant, natural gas plant, or nuclear plant. Some basic things that you should think about and do. And for the most part, they don't have them.
But again, we're talking about technology that was largely designed during the 60s and then constructed in the 70s.
But transferring electricity from one part to the other, we've been doing that since the 1800s.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I'm not defending poor design. What I'm saying is, we can sit here and say, hey, this is what you should do. And yes, it sounds like in hindsight,
that's right.
That's right. But bottom line is the plants that are proposed now would be vastly more advanced and constructed in a manner that had, I'm sure, all of these things taken care of and considered.
Well, one of the things that did come out of this, and there's controversy over this, is there are the NRC required the utilities to establish around the country supplies that could be used by one or more nuclear power plants if needed. So that has been done. Some of the supplies that are in there, to me, shouldn't be in there. They should be on site where a nuclear power plant is. The utilities should have been allowed to go to the State Utilities Commission and say, I want to put this in my rate base to buy these supplies, put a small building here, and have them on or near my site so that I can get them in a matter of minutes instead of hours or days. There's so much that can be done, so much that we have learned from Fukushima Daiichi. The NRC and some other people have used Fukushima Daiichi in such a way that we do things for power plants in the United States that aren't even near an ocean. If we build a nuclear power plant here in Idaho, we're going to have to do some of these same things. It's a requirement. When's the last time that anybody knows that there was a tsunami that went through Idaho? Okay? We don't continually think these things through. I mean, that's one of the great things about the Navy nuclear propulsion program. It has a vast amount of knowledge of lessons learned, not just from the Navy, but by people thinking them up, or by accidents that have occurred somewhere else, or incidents that have occurred somewhere else. And yet, the Navy guys that have gone to operate and maintain and build these commercial nuclear power plants around the United States, they've offered tens of thousands of ideas to commercial utility plants. A lot of them have been accepted, but a lot of them have not, because it's money. It's money and time and people. And of course, time and people is money. And the utilities over the years, we've gone from the 60s when we had people who were in charge of utilities as the chairman or the CEO or the president or whatever. They grew up in that industry. They knew how to make electricity and send it somewhere. Changes in public policy, whether it's in Washington, D.C., whether it's at the state level, has continued to change and burden down, especially our nuclear power plants, but all utilities that have any plants, to the point that we have morphed from very knowledgeable people to more bankers, more lawyers, more accountants being in charge. But that's for survival, because they have to make sure that their company, their organization, lives by all these rules. There's changes in public policy that don't just come from Congress, don't just come from the state legislature, but they come from places like the NRC. This week, a friend of mine called me from Washington, D.C., and he's got 50 years of experience in that town, including in nuclear. And he said everybody that he talks to thinks that we should get rid of the NRC and start all over again. Well, I don't quite have that view, but close. And because they have been an anti-nuclear organization and an economic burden on progress in nuclear ever since they were formed in 1974.
Richard, you have done it again. I'm horrified to go home. Tell my wife what I found out today. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Let's finish it up next week with Chernobyl.
Okay, we will.
We're good. Thank you for coming in, sir.
Most welcome.